और अभी की बड़ी खबर आपको बता देते हैं कि श्रीलंका के राष्ट्रपति गोटाबाया राजपक्षे सिंगापुर के लिए रवाना हो गए हैं। खबर यह आई थी कि उन्होंने मालदीव्स सरकार से एक प्राइवेट जेट की मांग की थी और वहां से वो सिंगापुर निकलना चाहते थे और इसी कड़ी में अब खबर यह है कि वो सिंगापुर के लिए रवाना हो गए। हमारे साथ हमारे संवाददाता श्रीजा मौजूद हैं, सीधे उनके पास चलते हैं, उनसे बात करते हैं। श्रीजा, ये बड़ी खबर, ताजा अपडेट्स और इस खबर के पीछे और क्या कुछ है उस पर रोशनी डाल दें।
Well, there are various conflicting reports at the moment that is surfacing, but what we do know is that he had taken a flight from here, from basically Sri Lanka, along with his wife and two other bodyguards to Maldives, and after which what we understand is that he had requested for a private jet to fly out of Maldives, is what we're given to understand, and also a private jet has been arranged for him. But there are several other reports also surfacing that he will now be taking a flight, a Saudi Arabian flight, and fly to especially, Singapore, and from there to Jeddah. So there are various conflicting reports that are surfacing at the moment, but the whereabouts of, Mr. Gotabaya, which is last known is that he is still in Maldives and that he will be boarding a private jet to Singapore, from where he will be taking a Saudi Arabian airlines flight to especially Jeddah. So the final destination of Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is still not known, because what's more important here to know that he is still the president of Sri Lanka. He has not handed over his official resignation, although he's issued a Gazette notification saying that he's handing over his duties because he's unable to do so to Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, which means Ranil Wickremesinghe is right now the acting president. But what next, as far as the Sri Lankan politics, is still not known, because it is still under right now as we speak, it's still in limbo, because as per the plan, what we understand, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was supposed to resign on the 13th of July, but since that has not really happened, the plan was also for the parliament to convene on the 15th, and eventually the nomination of the presidential names, and then elect a president on the 20th of July. But clearly we see right now Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is the acting president, to which all the party leaders have objected to. They've arrived at a consensus. They've asked the speaker to become the acting president. But on the other hand, we are understanding that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, in the cabinet meeting, has decided to form an all-party government. But he also did, of course, go on to say that a new prime minister must be elected, which means he's categorically saying that he will remain as the acting president. But if you're asking about what's really happening in Sri Lanka at the moment, despite what several of the protesters have been carrying out with their protests for over now 96 days out on the streets, they continue to demand that they want Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign from his post as a president, and also they want Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe to resign from the post of prime ministership and also as the acting president.
श्रीजा, यहाँ पे कई सारे सवाल थे। पहला कि जिस स्थिति में अभी रानिल विक्रमसिंघे हैं, कल भी एक बैठक हुई थी, आज भी एक बैठक हुई, इसका मतलब तो साफ है कि इतने बदतर हालात में भी वो सत्ता से बाहर जाने को तैयार नहीं है, आखिरी वक्त तक कोशिश करते हुए नजर आ रहे हैं, जिससे वो अपनी कुर्सी या फिर अपने परिवार की कुर्सी बचाए रखें।
Well, clearly there is a power struggle that cannot be ignored at the moment, because it is literally a struggle amongst the political leaders. On one hand, you have, of course, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He had conveyed, especially his message to the speaker last week, saying that, yes, when he fled the country or the land from Sri Lanka, well, there were several reports doing the rounds that he's on the seas at the moment. He went on to talk about how he has informed the speaker and also later the Prime Minister that he will be sending out his resignation and resigning on the 13th. But clearly that has not happened, because this is exactly what many Sri Lankans, when we did speak to, were talking about Sri Lankan politics. It's unlike, in fact, in terms of the political history, as far as Mr. Rajapaksas are concerned, it's way different because they do not really believe or take by their words. So this is something which we understand Sri Lankans were talking about, and clearly just what we gauge from them, we understand that Gotabaya has not stepped down on the 13th, what he had conveyed on that particular day. But as far as Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is concerned, yes, the demand also, the chorus grew louder, demanding his resignation. But instead, now he goes on to talk about where a new Prime Minister must be elected and he will remain as the President. So clearly, Ranil Wickremesinghe is also... Now, though Ranil Wickremesinghe offered that he's willing to step down as the Prime Minister, but he is still remaining in power in politics, Sri Lankan politics, as the acting President. While you have citizens out there on the streets, fighting for, in terms of, waiting for fuel or essentials for that matter, whether it is food or medicines. On the other hand, you have the power struggle here, while because of which we understand several programs like the IMF bailout, which is supposed to happen, that's been already delayed, and in terms of the World Food Programme also, that's been delayed at the moment because we understand the IMF has also been closely watching all the political developments here in Sri Lanka.
श्रीजा, पहला सवाल ये था कि रानिल विक्रमसिंघे ने सेना और पुलिस को कहा कि सख्ती से निपटें इन प्रदर्शनकारियों को। क्या उनकी कोई अथॉरिटी है या फिर सेना और पुलिस उनकी बात मान रही है क्योंकि वो एक स्लिपरी ग्राउंड पर मौजूद है? दूसरा, कल जिस तरह का प्रदर्शन हम लोगों ने देखा था, एजिटेशन देखा था, जिसमें आप भी उस प्रदर्शन की चपेट में आ गई थी, आज क्या हालात हैं जमीन पे? जरा इन दोनों सवालों का जवाब दे दें।
Well, the update that we're getting now is from a short while ago. The protesters, they had called for a press meet. In the press meet, the protesters have confirmed that they will be handing over or vacating the political structures except for the old parliament. The reason that they have given is that the old parliament or the parliamentary presidential secretariat is within the perimeter or the periphery of Gotago Gama. Now, right adjacent to the old parliament is a demonstration site. Now that was converted into a village which is called the Gotago Gama village by the protesters. The protesters have been camping there at that particular demonstration site for over 97 days now. They say they will not go home until Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns, and also now the chorus is growing louder for Ranil Wickremesinghe's resignation as well. So they have continued to stay on that particular demonstration ground. So which means, according to the press meet, they say they will be handing over the presidential palace, the Prime Minister's office, and also temple trees as well. So these are certain political structures that they have taken over in the last 1 week or so. That is only because they have sent out a message to these politicians that if you all don't go home, we will occupy the corridors of power, which they have done. But now a clarification has come out that they will only continue to occupy the old parliament. Now, to the question that you have asked, that do they actually go by the orders of, yes, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. What's important to note that here is he is still the Prime Minister and that he is still now as the acting President. There are several orders issued by him when after he took over as the acting President. The first was, of course, the emergency law here in Sri Lanka just about yesterday that came in place, and then he had imposed the curfew till about 5 a.m. this morning. He imposed these orders as an acting President. Now, as far as what we did not see in the last few days was the number of police or the security forces deployment outside and in the compound inside of Ranil Wickremesinghe's office. We saw a huge heavy police deployment from Sri Lankan police to Air Force, and also in terms of the special task force team. So all had formed a human chain. This is inside the compound of Ranil Wickremesinghe's office and outside as well. So we could really see that standoff that went about for over 3 to 4 hours. There was tear gas shelling shelling for over 2.5 hours. And despite the number of rounds in terms of the tear gas that was shelled on the protesters, they were relentless. The protesters kept coming back to the same spot because they were very sure of the fact that they will take over Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's office, and that's what just happened as far as yesterday is concerned, and today again as we speak. So these are the various political structures that have turned out to become a tourist spot right now. So any common man can enter the presidential palace or Temple Trees, which is the official residence of Ranil Wickremesinghe, and as well as Ranil Wickremesinghe's office. So those are certain political structures that is very frequented by the elites and political heads. But now you see common man also taking a tour and exploring these places as well.
शुक्रिया सृजा इस पूरी रिपोर्ट के लिए और विस्तार से बताने के लिए वहां क्या है हालात।